Hey, what is up guys? Welcome back to the channel, welcome back to Gran Turismo 7 and welcome back to my Japanese car culture week. And we're going to start the first full day focusing on one of the most interesting categories of car straight out of Japan, and this is the K car class. Now, a lot of people do pronounce it as key car, but the real pronunciation I'm pretty sure of is K car. Now, what are these? I think we all really know that these are small, tiny little cars, but there's more to it than just looking quite funky and a sporty little silhouette to look at. There's actually tons of these things. They're very, very popular over in Japan. There was a bit of a decrease in kind of their popularity, I believe in sort of the mid 2010s due to a tax rise and such, but again, they've kind of risen from that and become again more popular over in Japan, and that's mostly where you will find them. There is a few exceptions though, and one of those cars does feature in GT7, the Daihatsu Copen, which actually did get sold in the United Kingdom. I see quite a few of them around, but I believe there is two specifications there. You've got the 0.6 litre engine and a 1.3 version, which is more for the target of a European market. So what actually is a K car? Now, this is essentially just a regulation created by the Japanese government in 1949 that sort of regulated the size of a vehicle, the engine capacity of a vehicle, and the likes of the power output and stuff. Now, it's been revised many times over the years, but the ones that you typically see these days is the 600cc engines, power in terms of the more sort of sporty, sleek looking models. You're talking around about 60 brake horsepower, so nothing mind-blowingly fast, and obviously they have that very iconic sort of tiny and almost squished look to them. If we're talking along the lines of sort of a Western version of a K car, then we're sort of talking maybe around the likes of maybe a smart car is something that you might regularly see in the West that kind of resembles that almost sort of design of a vehicle, but these are very unique to Japan. It's one of the more interesting and I guess weird looking kind of vehicles or category of vehicle that has come out of that country, and it's almost iconic at this point, and I feel like these cars do not get enough love by Western audiences, but these are massive in Japan. Like I said, sales figures for these things are ridiculous, mainly because the tax and all that kind of stuff on them is very low. Obviously, they're a small CC'd engine. They're not making a ridiculous amount of power, and well, some of the manufacturers have gone absolutely crazy with designs over the years, which means we do have some very almost sport-like models, the like of the Suzuki Cappuccino, Honda Beat, the S660, I believe, and they all kind of do look sporty, very kind of in your face. It's a very unique looking car, but not all of them are like that. A lot of them are just kind of regular day-to-day passenger vehicles, and there is a spin-off of the typical K car. You've got K trucks, you've almost got the sort of people carrier ones that are again sort of like K people carriers in a way. There's many different categories within the K car, I guess, regulations, but typically you will just hear it under K car because that's kind of what they're known for, and that's kind of the overall arch theme and regulation of these vehicles. But there is many kind of sort of subgenres. Think of it almost like EDM. You've got the typical genre, and then you've got your spin-offs from like drum and bass, house, and all that kind of stuff. It essentially exists within this category of car. It's very cool, and it's a shame that more games don't necessarily feature them. Now let's talk about Gran Turismo history. There's been around about 60 to 70 models of K car featured through Gran Turismo games throughout, well, every single release. But if we speak about the game that we're currently on specifically, there's actually really only 4 proper full-blown K cars, and well, I'm going to review each and every single one of them. We have the Daihatsu Copen, the Honda Beat, the Suzuki Cappuccino, and the Honda S660. We also do have a bit of a spin-off K car, which is the Daihatsu Copen VGT, the RJ, or Racing Jacket, which you would have seen up earlier on the channel. So if you do want to check out my opinion of essentially the, I guess, full-blown potential of a K car, then well, go ahead and watch that one. So I set myself the mammoth task of testing all of Gran Turismo 7's K cars, and we're going to test them one by one. What we're going to do is the typical review format of a lap around the Nordschleife in its standard form, then go fully balls to the wall crazy and fully upgrade each and every single one of them for a high speed ring run. Now we're looking at car number one here, and this is the one that it is a K car, of course it is, but because I've seen it so many times, it's almost not a K car to me, which is rather quite weird, but I'll kind of explain. K cars are mainly cars that I just see as something that I see in Japanese media, the likes of the Gran Turismo series or anything to do with Japan, and you'll see a ton of these things. But the Daihatsu Copen is a car that was available on the UK market. Now the thing that I absolutely love about this thing is just how much of like a little ladybird it looks like, and I believe Jeremy Clarkson did get in a bit of trouble back in the day for calling it, well, homosexual. So I'm not going to go too far into that, but he did get into a lot of trouble for calling this car exactly that. But in terms of styling, it just reminds me of a ladybird or a ladybug, whatever you want to call it, constantly. For some reason it just looks exactly like one, and it is actually a model that's kind of stylized in the games of likes of Ridge Racer in a more fictional racy form. Obviously with this being a car that was sold on the UK market, I just cannot see it as a, you know, a Japanese K car as such. It was, you know, kind of more widespread than a lot of these K cars. In terms of output, you had the standard sort of 600cc engine. Again, I believe a few of them may have gone over here to the UK. I know there's one for sale currently for a few grand. But mainly we got the 1.3 litre, which was made more for the Western market and did have a bit of extra grunt and power to it. But those were the two engines, I believe, that were made for the Daihatsu Copen before it got took off sale from the Western market in around about, I believe, 2011 or so. It has had another model since, which is actually the one that the RJ is based on, the Copen Racing Jacket VGT. Again, very much stylized towards the original, I guess, up-to-date Copen, but we don't actually have that within Gran Turismo 7, which is rather quite weird, but we do have the original Copen here. But how did it handle the Nordschleife? Now, funnily enough, for me, I feel like this was, in terms of stability and just how it felt, was the second most stable car of the bunch, which might sound weird considering these cars don't put out much horsepower, but stability wise and just getting it through the corners, this felt bulkier and overall more stable than the rest of them, apart from one which I'll kind of talk about later, and there is a reason for that. But it did feel very, very slow, and when I say slow, I mean very, very slow, at least kind of with the likes of the Cappuccino and the Honda Beat and the S660. They do feel quite sporty, whereas the Copen just almost feels like an oddball, and I believe this is the only K car that actually doesn't actually have an engine swap, whereas all the others do. It's almost sort of like the abandoned one of the bunch, and overall it was just the least exciting to drive. Would I recommend picking this one up? Well, yeah, because there's a reason for that, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But let's move on next to the Suzuki Cappuccino. Now this is one of the more iconic K cars of the bunch, and there is a good reason for that, and it's mainly Gran Turismo. For some reason this car was put into the Gran Turismo games and it exploded in the Western market, and again, you can go ahead and pick these up in the likes of the United Kingdom for second hand, and you know, a good few grand for a decent one. Now this is, in my opinion, one of the ultimate sporty K cars. This has got the typical sort of, I guess, small rear end and a really long bonnet, kind of squished together and looking extremely sporty and quick, and it actually does feel that way. Now in terms of performance points, this is the second lowest rated of the bunch. The lowest rated is the Copen, and that's probably why it just felt overall rather quite terrible, whereas the Suzuki Cappuccino felt very, very lively, and that's a bit of an understatement. This car felt extremely lively throughout my entire time on the Nordschleife, and this car's not putting out much horsepower. It's not going to break speed records. The most I actually got out of it speed wise was around about 110 to 111 miles per hour getting pushed downhill, so there's no real reason for this car to be sat there and be as sort of aggressive into corners and almost sports-like as it really was. But it did feel good. It actually felt like a full-blown micro race car from standard if we're looking at just purely the corners. and that's the thing that you'll kind of see was a kind of a running theme with most of these K cars. Most of the ones that we have in GT7 are sort of full-blown race-like cars, you know, sporty cars, should I say. They feel almost track ready. No, they're not fast, but they all do feel capable cars, and really it does kind of show in terms of the sort of picks from Gran Turismo. Now, there is another little Suzuki K car that's almost legendary within Gran Turismo, which is the Auto Works, and it's one that I feel like we really desperately need within Gran Turismo 7. Hopefully, I mean, this is a long shot, but I really want that car to come. It's almost a Gran Turismo icon, just like the likes of the Suzuki Cappuccino and the Honda Beat and such. It's been around for such a long time, and for it to be missing from this game just feels like it's kind of a missed opportunity, because that thing had a lot of tuning potential in a lot of the other games, even if it was ridiculously slow. Now let's just quickly touch a bit more on the Cappuccino while it finishes up its lap. How did it feel overall, and is there anything to really know apart from how aggressive it is in the corners? And yeah, there is. The sound of this thing, for some reason it sounds absolutely incredible. It really does feel like you're driving something much more capable than a little tiny K car, and that's kind of credit to it. Now again, this is a fairly low PP rated car. It sits in the high 200s, so it's nothing to shout home about. And there's another little kind of side note I want to touch on, is the fact that this one is actually post-launch content. This came in, I believe, the first content update alongside the I think it was a BRZ GT300, and I think the Toyota as well. They both came along with the Suzuki Cappuccino, and this is definitely one of the most exciting of the bunch, and if not, this is probably the most popular of the K cars, for good reason, because there was a way to kind of mess around with the suspension and get this thing to sort of roll around absolutely everywhere. However, you can go the opposite route and make it a full-blown kind of planted sort of mini go-kart in reality. So overall, the Suzuki Cappuccino really did exceed my expectations. It's much more aggressive, which isn't really saying much considering some of the big horsepower cars we have in the game, but it did feel great overall, and I really cannot complain about this tiny little Suzuki. It's a Gran Turismo icon. It's a car that I hope to see in, you know, every Gran Turismo release going, and I really just hope this comes along in the next game as well. Is it worth picking up? I'd say yes, to be quite honest, because it is just a quirky little car. Whether you want to go down the sort of tuner engine swap route, or if you want to kind of go down the sort of more weird and wacky route, you can essentially do both. It's sort of a jack of all trades. You can make an insanely fast engine swap build, or you can make an insanely clown-like jelly car that will just roll over at every touch if you just want to get a full-blown laugh out of this thing. So in all honesty, the Suzuki Cappuccino is a car that I'd say is worth looking into, unlike the likes of the Copen, which is a little bit hit and miss at times. Now let's move on next to my personal favourite of the bunch, and well, you can probably guess this one. It's the Honda Beat. Now there's just something awesome about this car. Stylistic wise, I absolutely love it, and for some reason, just looking at the front end, it reminds me of a rabbit, which might sound rather weird, but you know, I'm just one of those people that I'll look at a car and say, huh, that looks like it's smiling. Oh, that reminds me of this, that reminds me of that. And the Honda Beat, for me, certainly looks like a quirky little rabbit. Now stylistically wise, it's very similar to the Suzuki Cappuccino. A decently sized long bonnet, a really small rear end of the thing, and overall it's a tiny compact size with its typical sporty looks. But for me, in terms of style wise, this is just the best looking of the bunch, and again, it's a very, very awesome and fun car to drive. Now in terms of overall performance of the Honda Beat, you are sort of sitting on a little bit more of a performance point than the likes of the Copen and even the Suzuki Cappuccino, and overall this is probably the most capable, and I'd say overall best of the bunch, just in terms of throwing them around. Yes, it's an older vehicle, and yes, it does have a bit of a younger brother, which will come up next, but in terms of how it felt throughout the entire run of the Nordschleife, the Honda Beat just felt the best. It has a great little sound, it's a sporty little car, and one thing I am going to touch on whilst we're quickly on the interior is the interior itself. The seats and the carpets in this thing are typically zebra printed. It's just one of those typically Japanese quirky things, and I absolutely love it for it. This is just a great little car. Now this does have another engine swap. In fact, all of these realistically do, apart from the Copen, meaning that they can be tuned to some serious potential. Now I'm not going to cover the engine swaps today. The main reason for that is I'm going to kind of save them for a future video for a good reason, but we will be fully, you know, upgrading them and putting all the tuning parts on them to hit up the high speed ring in its standard form, just to kind of keep it fair. But the Honda Beat with the K20 swap is perhaps one of my favorite swaps in the entire game. We all know the K20 platform can be swapped into almost anything. You only have to go into the custom car scene to see the likes of BMW swap with VTEC K20 engines, and well, yep, the Honda Beat does get a K20 swap, typically in line with Honda, but it does handle the power very, very well. You can essentially plant that K20 engine in there and build a proper full-blown monster, and it sounds absolutely incredible. I do have a fully upgraded VTEC swapped K20 Beast, and you may have seen that in the trailer, and it's probably one of the most usable sporty little cars I think I've driven within GT7. And again, I will cover that in a separate video. I want to focus on the base cars and their base, you know, fully upgraded versions first. So the Honda Beat, does it exceed my expectations? Yes. Is this a car that I've used many, many times? Yes. Is it my favorite of the K cars? 100%. They're just absolutely insane little machines, and as you can see, it's not afraid to get a little bit lively either, meaning to me this will always be my favorite of the K cars of all time. There is just something about the Honda Beat styling, performance, the fact that the engine swap in this thing is incredibly good, although the Suzuki Cappuccino is very, very close with that one. I just feel like it's definitely a car that can sort of handle that amount of power, weirdly enough, and it's one that you just wouldn't expect to be able to handle that amount of power. Again, the Honda Beat is a fantastic machine. I'm glad it's in GT7. Again, it's a typical Gran Turismo icon from many, many years really, and it's a car that I hope we do see again in the future. And for me, this and the Suzuki Cappuccino really give the K cars, you know, a proper looking into. They make them sort of worthwhile cars where, yes, most of them are typical sort of Japanese grocery getters. The likes of the Honda Beat and the Suzuki Cappuccino and its younger brother, the S660, really do sort of make this car category worth looking into. They're sporty, they're fun, they're not going to blow your socks off with extreme speed, but if you wanted a really, really quirky car, yes, you can sort of get these things looked into and possibly imported depending where you are in the world. Now again, the Honda Beat is one that I've just not really seen myself in person, but in terms of games, it's always been a pretty fun go-to car. And we're going to review its younger brother finally of the last car around the Nordschleife, the S660. Now this is essentially the Honda Beat in modern times. In terms of the styling, I'm not as much as a fan of it as I am the likes of the Cappuccino and the Honda Beat. I don't think it has the personality. Yes, it's kind of cool seeing where the kind of, I guess, technology and style wise the companies have kind of gone as the times have gone on. You know, this is a much more modern vehicle, and overall it does feel that way. This essentially, you know, I guess the cool quirky thing about it, feels like it's took everything that is modern and up to date and then just squeezed it into a tiny little sporty K car, and it really does show. In terms of, you know, the interior, it all feels premium, it feels modern, it does feel like you're in a full-blown modern car. There is no holds, you know, kind of barred or whatever. It is just squeezed in there in this small little package. Now in terms of overall performance, this is the best one by, you know, quite a long shot. This sits in the kind of mid 350s range, I believe, or maybe 340s. So around about that mark, it has around 30 to 40 performance points more than anything else in this category in terms of the standard road going versions, not counting the VGT, which is essentially just, you know, what would happen if K cars went crazy. But yeah, this is the best one. It does run on a better compound of tires as well, so overall you're going to be expecting better performance from it, and it really is that way. If you was going for just flat out performance, you would pick this one. It does have an engine swap. I believe it gets the bike sport engine in, and I've kind of touched on that and reviewed that in the past. In terms of overall handling performance, it does feel much more capable even in its standard form. You know, it handles the corners better, it feels much more stable, the grip's pretty much always there. Obviously it does retain its typical small engine, but it really does feel like a proper nod to a K sports car. There is no doubt in that. But in all honesty, the 660 just doesn't interest me as much as the likes of the Cappuccino and the Beat. Maybe it's nostalgia bias. Maybe I look on the Cappuccino and the Beat as cars that I've kind of, I guess, grown up with, and they've always been there in the likes of Gran Turismo, whereas the 660 kind of came along in the likes of, I believe, GT Sport, and it's sort of been around ever since. Maybe I just don't have that nostalgia love for it, but you know, there is no taking away that performance wise, this is the best one. Hands down, I don't care what anyone says. If you was going for the best performing K car, you'd just go for the 660. But just in terms of just trying to love the thing, I just don't love it as much. If you want to easily beat events, go for this one. If you want to absolutely have full-blown enjoyment with that typical sporty 90s look and feel, go for the Beat or the Cappuccino. So the 660, let's just have a quick talk about some of its styling cues. You can see it's closely related to the Honda Beat. It genuinely does feel like a full-blown modern version. It does lose some of the quirks in terms of the sort of interior, the zebra seats and carpet lining and all that kind of stuff is gone to make way for a typically sporty sort of, I guess, mini race seat in a way. It's two-seaters, obviously. Engine-wise, it's not bad at all. It's got the typical up-to-date modern K-car engine. Again, it has to stick within the regulations, but in terms of its suspension, handling, and all of that stuff, well, it's the best of the bunch, like I said. So the 660 is overall a great car, but I just cannot love it, like I said. Let me know what you guys think about this car. I know there's a lot of people out there that either really hate this thing or really love it, and I think the people that mainly love it is because it was very handy in one of the 1 hour endurance races that I believe focused on the K cars, and obviously the K car or lightweight K Cup that we got kind of post launch in GT7 as well. This car was essentially the best of the bunch. There's no denying that. I think a lot of people like it from that. In terms of the swap, it's still not the most capable of the bunch. I'd actually rank the swap third, below the Cappuccino swap and below the Honda Beat swap. I'm just not a big fan of the bike sport engine in this thing. It takes a lot of tuning. Yes, it can handle it better, I'd say, from standard than the likes of the Cappuccino can handle its swap. The Honda Beat overall does seem to handle that swap very well, but to be honest, the bike sport engine just takes a lot of getting to, you know, tune in to realistically work in a proper performance manner. The gear ratios are just too long for the car. It takes a ton of time to get the suspension handling the car. So to be honest, I cannot rank the S660 as my favorite. But like I said, if you want standard performance, then well, this is the go-to. So that is the standard ones done. So let's have a look how they rank. Now they're actually ranking in two different categories. We have the PP300, which is going to include the Suzuki Cappuccino from 1991 and the Daihatsu Copen Active Top from 2002. And as you can see, there's barely any difference in performance. However, the Suzuki Cappuccino absolutely smashes the Daihatsu Copen. I told you that Copen just felt heavy, slow, and just overall terrible. Even if it is regulated, it just didn't feel that good. They both run on the same compound of tires as well, comfort mediums for this thing, and I just could not find myself enjoying the Daihatsu Copen half as much of the kind of rest of them. It just felt too sluggish, but the Cappuccino proving that it can be a sporty car. So far, the leading one of the bunch is the Suzuki Cappuccino. However, it's going to then be topped by both of the Honda models. Now, I think this one was obvious, and I think most people would have predicted this considering that massive jump in PP. The Honda S660 is the fastest. Obviously, it's the most modern, and it runs on a better compound of tyre. The comfort softs, giving it a time of 9:59, and the Honda Beat with a 10:05. So that's 6 seconds difference with a big jump in performance points. And in all honesty, I think if you put the comfort softs on the Honda Beat would probably absolutely match, if not beat, the 660. And again, that is my personal favourite of the bunch. The Cappuccino, the Beat, brilliant cars. The S660 just felt almost too on rails, too modern, and kind of lost that typical K car personality along the way, even if it does kind of retain a bit of a throwback. Now let's move on next to these absolutely awesome things, and well, Ridge Racer inspired Daihatsu Copen, anyone? We are going to go for the fully modified versions. Now what I've done here is keeping them all on the same compound of tyres, using every single performance mod possible. So they're all running racing softs. I haven't gone and fine-tuned any single one to give any of them an advantage, and overall they are all running aero, massive turbos, full weight reduction. They are at the max performance points for a standard version. Next up, we also have the Suzuki Cappuccino in its miniature Dodge Viper form. Again, a very popular livery and swap. This one you've probably seen in my most ridiculous wheelie car video, where we had the Suzuki Cappuccino popping wheelies, rolling over all the time, and we just had a damn good laugh. So I thought I'd kind of keep that one as we go ahead and review the little thing for the miniature Dodge Viper. That is the Suzuki Cappuccino. Then we have my personal favorite, the Honda Beat, the typically sporty little Honda running its Spoon Sports livery. In my opinion, it's one of the more iconic colours for any Honda, is to just throw on that sort of blue and yellow livery. Again, it's running as much aero as possible. They're all wide bodied as well. But one thing I do absolutely love about the Honda Beat is the fact that the exhaust pipe, you can sort of see the piping run along the back, and it has this awesome little stance to it where it's almost on a ridiculous rake. And finally, we have the S660, which is obviously the most aggressive looking of the bunch, and essentially turns this thing into a mini NSX, and it is a damn good time. There's no denying that. If you want to get the personality back in a 660, then just go and fully upgrade it. That is when the car is at its absolute best. And again, I prefer the non-swapped version over the swap version. So for me, that is the ideal version. So we're going to hit up the high speed ring. I've kind of give you the rules and regulations, and we're going to go with the Daihatsu Copen first. Now, as you can see, I've took inspiration from Ridge Racer, like I did mention. I've just kind of added the wing back on to sort of, you know, bring it in line with the rest of them. So how did it feel upgraded? Did it feel any better? To be quite honest, no, it did not. The Daihatsu Copen, for some reason, I just cannot gel with this car. Yes, it looks cool, don't get me wrong. There's actually a really cool look to it when it's kind of kitted out. For some reason, it does look like a tiny little, you know, full-blown Ridge Racer type car, which is obviously why these liveries are kind of made for this thing. But overall, is it a decent enough car to really save it from being the weakest of the K cars? No, it's not. Again, it still sort of gets those traits over there that it's just sort of, for some reason, really sluggish feeling. It again feels weighty. I know they're kind of regulated and such, but there's just this weird weight to it, and this weird sort of, I guess, handling performance to it that just doesn't make it fun. It doesn't move about as much as the others. It feels almost too on rails, and again, it just feels very, very sluggish no matter where you take this. It's not too much of a slouch in a straight line anymore, but it just can't make up for overall how this car feels. I just cannot gel with the Copen. For me, this is just the worst of the K cars. Now we have the Legends itself, the Dodge Viper. No, of course it's not the Dodge Viper, it's the Suzuki Cappuccino. And this one, performance wise, from standard, it's okay. It's nothing mind-blowing. It's really much better with the swap, and it's again the kind of vehicle that I prefer with the swap than without it. But in terms of the actual sound of this thing, it sounds absolutely awesome. There is just this really sort of growly gurgle that very much reminds me of the likes of a Toyota Supra and a Nissan GTR. It feels and sounds much quicker than this thing actually is. This thing should not be kind of sounding as aggressive as it actually is. And in terms of its handling, again, the aggression does continue. It genuinely does feel like a mini go-kart. When you've gone from something as dull as the Daihatsu Copen to something as wild and wacky and almost go-kart like as the Suzuki Cappuccino, you really do feel that bolster up in performance. And overall, this is just a fantastic car. Would I recommend fully upgrading this one? Would I recommend getting your hands on it in both standard and upgraded form? Yeah, of course I would. Go ahead and do the swap as well. Trust me, you won't regret that. I believe it's the RX-7 swap for this one. I'm pretty sure it is. And it is overall a fantastic car, which essentially you turn into a little rotary beast. Now, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but it's been a while since I've done that one, but I'm pretty sure it's the RX-7 swap. Go and get your hands on that one as well. Now we've got my personal favourite, the Honda Beat. Again, it just looks absolutely awesome. And how was it overall? Funnily enough, it still kind of brought those characteristics over of being very, very lively, like the Cappuccino, meaning that these two round out as my favourites hands down. There is no denying that these cars kind of give you that feeling of a sporty, loose car, but at the same time a very, very capable car with much more energy and life about them than either the, you know, Copen, which is just dull as dishwater no matter what you try and do with it, or the S660 that feels just too modern and sort of, I guess, too advanced and too on rails. Whereas the Honda Beat and the Cappuccino, well, they just feel like little mini go-karts. And as you can see, the sort of weight transfer on this car is always there. The looks are there. You know, you've got this sort of insane thing about this car that is just so much fun. And I feel like these are some of the most fun cars within GT7. And if we're going to talk about the two main ones, the Cappuccino and the Beat, they are some of the best times I've had within GT7. Whether you're on pad, whether you're on wheel, you can just go ahead, upgrade these and just fling them around any track and just have a smile on your face. And that's what these cars are all about. They are Gran Turismo legends and they continue to be that way in GT7. So let's get the 660 out of the way. This is the final one of the bunch, the most capable of the bunch and the one that you'd expect to do better than anything else. Again, like I said, for me, okay, yes, I enjoy it more upgraded than, you know, I guess standard, but it just feels too on rails. With this car, you've just got no worries about crashing it. You've got no worries about it sort of throwing you in a wall or just, you know, being as quirky as the other two. It feels planted, it feels on rails, and if you was going to go on outright performance and just how these cars, you know, should be, if you were going for a tracked version of a K car, then, well, typically you go for the 660 because it is literally on rails. There is no denying that. It's very, very good handling, very, very good brakes. Overall top speed, it's still kind of sort of matched towards the Cappuccino and the Honda Beat, but it does feel overall quicker. So yes, the 660 once again sort of tops the, I guess, overall times in terms of being the, I guess, more technologically advanced and more focused version. You know, again, it does away with the quirks of the 90s models and essentially refines them, making this car almost too good for this class to be anything, you know, sort of lively and quirky like the rest of them. So that one's going to finish the lap and we're going to go ahead and have a look at the overall times. Now, as you can see, these cars are actually not last. They're all faster than the Ambulance, which is, you know, kind of surprising in a way. I expected them to have really, really low top speeds compared to that high medic, but, you know, fair enough, they are faster. The S660 from 2015 did a 1 minute 20.632, putting it top, and I think we could have predicted that one all along. Again, it is the most capable of the bunch. Just under 2 seconds slower is the Honda Beat from 91 with a 122.495. Another incredibly close one actually, and actually jumps the lot of them and surprises me, is the Daihatsu Copen with a 124.503, which is just bizarre. For some reason, I did not expect that car to be there, and the slowest one is the Cappuccino with a 125.694. but my favourites just have to go to that Cappuccino and Beat. Maybe it's because I've got nostalgia bias, maybe because the engine swaps on them are absolutely fantastic, but those are my two favourites. So thank you for joining me. I hope at the beginning of this video you learned a little bit about what a K-car actually is. I hope you've kind of enjoyed the ride of looking into Gran Turismo's quirky little mini cars. And you know, Polyphony, you need to get your focus back. Bring back all of those models that were in the past games, because they were just a ton of fun. They're Gran Turismo icons, and yet we only realistically have 4 proper road going versions. So, you know, hopefully this just spreads a bit of awareness on K cars. Hopefully you learned a bit of something. Hopefully you now know more about the 4 K cars we have within Gran Turismo. I'm kind of going to try and balance these with sort of a bit of facts, a bit of information, and then obviously, you know, how the things are kind of transferring over into Gran Turismo 7. So hopefully it does give you a nice insight into the K car category, and that is going to round up my K car day. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one. I hope you all have a fantastic weekend, whatever you're doing. Take care, guys. Peace.